Hello, guys and gals, and welcome! Rogue, I choose you! That's right, we are doing Pokemon Season 1 starter picks for Diablo 4. I want to be a sneaky rogue, the sneakiest there ever was. And if I can't sneak up on you, I will shoot you with my bow. Laying traps across the land while collecting ears. Bow, bow, bow. Okay, that's all you got. Today we're going to be talking about why the Rogue might be the best pick for Diablo 4 Season 1, and we're going to go over that together. We're going to talk about why the Rogue is a powerful character, and what you can do to make yourself a very nice starter character. So if you do happen to choose the Rogue as your starter character, the most powerful builds tend to be Twisting Blades, Barrage, Flurry, and Penetrating Shot for your leveling builds. Now, these are leveling builds, not necessarily your endgame builds. Now, the Rogue has been really fun for me. I've made Trappers, I've made ranged Rogues. I have not made a melee Rogue just yet, but I've seen some pretty hellacious melee Rogues using Twisting Blades and things like that. My specific Rogue is based around some very odd mechanics involving tons and tons of explosions that happen when I shoot my Shadow Imbuement into a frozen target, which then results in tons of explosions, which then can potentially result in tons of damage. And by the time everything is finished, I dish out massive amounts of damage. I would really like to be able to get off one of these shots and show you just how stupid, like, my character can be. But I'm not really sure there's going to be enough monsters all lined up in a row for me to show you. It's kind of difficult to get a good shot in, because honestly I kill the monsters so fast that most of the time I can't really even, like, demonstrate like the explosive potential. But let's see if I can group the monsters up nicely and fire a shot in. And you get stuff like that, which is just silly. And let's do this one too. This one's fun. This particular character revolves around imbuements, which is something that we'll talk about. Imbuements are basically where you can imbue your attacks with specific elemental damages. Now, this works in both melee and ranged, and it's kind of like just a really cool way that the Rogue can push out some very interesting damage. In general, the Rogue has 3 different ones. She's got her Shadow Imbuement, which is very good at AoE damage for clearing large amounts of monsters. Poison Imbuement, which is very good at single target and does pretty good single target damage. And then Shadow Cold Imbuement, which is very nice for, like, freezing enemies, crowd control. And there's some very interesting like ways that they can interact with each other, which is really cool too. All in all, the Rogue is a crazy character that has both ranged abilities and is very much reminiscent of the Amazon from Diablo 2, because there are attacks like Rapid Fire, which is very similar to Strafe, Penetrating Shot, which is very similar to the piercing effect on some of the stronger abilities like Freezing Arrow and Exploding Arrow, and with the use of the Cold Imbuement, you can literally turn it into a Freezing Arrow. The Barrage, which works very similarly to Multi-Shot, although not quite the same. Heartseeker, which is very similar to Guided Arrow, and so forth and so on. And by the time you're done, you can actually make literally a Rogazon. That's actually what people have been dubbing it, because if you want to make a Rogazon, you totally can. And this particular character, the one that I designed, I actually have a theory craft up on her, and she is basically a Freezing Arrowzon. That's how I designed her. Another way that you can go on this character is melee, of course. You can go with things like Blade Shift, Invigorating Strike, Twisting Blades, Flurry, and these are more the melee side of things. Of course, the Rogue has more to her than just ranged and melee. She also has the imbuements. And then on top of that, she also has the trap tree. So she has things like Poison Trap, Death Trap, Caltrops. There is all sorts of various things like Smoke Grenades, Concealment, and even Shadow Step, which allows you to peer behind targets and attack them from behind. All in all, when it comes to this particular character, she has a slew of movement abilities, defensive protocols, all sorts of crazy things that she can utilize to save her life and more. On top of this, she also has some pretty cool ultimates as well, including a Shadow Clone that will basically just copy all of your abilities. The Death Trap, which basically allows you to suck monsters in, which is pretty cool, and dish out massive amounts of damage to them. You can lay down 3 of these, believe it or not. Rain of Arrows, which I just showed off earlier, which hits like everything on the screen, and if you use the Word of a Con amulet, you can make it imbuable. So you might notice that mine says imbuable. However, when you put the Word of a Con amulet on, it imbues it with all of the imbuements at one time, which is really awesome. On top of this, you also have access to a slew of passives and abilities which can change the way that your character works. Like, for instance, in this particular tree, there's a stealth option, which literally lets you make your character stealth up and heal himself whenever he's stealthing, which is pretty awesome. This one is just pretty crazy because if you're utilizing, say, something like concealment, which lets you stealth for 4 seconds, then you can gain a heal, 3% heal, while you're stealthed, which is pretty freaking awesome. And honestly, if you max that out, you can get the heal up pretty high. Now, if you take a look at the keystone passives on the rogue, there are things like momentum, which gives you cutthroat skill bonuses. There is things like close quarters combat, which is specifically set up for more of like a, what I call it, like close range character, basically. I mean, it is called close quarters combat, so I mean, that's really what it is about. We also have the precision, which is definitely for the characters that want to utilize ranged abilities. And then the one that I'm using right now is victimize, which is the lucky hit that has a 30% chance to cause explosions for 23% of the original damage did to them than surrounding enemies. That's how I'm able to clear rooms like absolutely amazingly fast. But with the combination of victimize, the Shadow Imbuement explosion, and also the Icy Alchemist Loop explosion, and utilizing things like Frost Burns, I'm able to freeze the enemies, explode them with this, get the Shadow Imbuement explosion, and also the Victimize explosion, because Penetrating Shot is actually amazing for its lucky hit chance. I know it says 52 right now, but when I build 3 combo points, it goes up to 99%, which is just absolutely insane. It's a 30% bonus, and on top of that, it also adds in some of my other bonuses. And when you actually hold your mouse over the tooltip, it says 99% lucky hit chance, which is kind of insane. So when I utilize a penetrating shot, I utilize other things that increase my lucky hit chance and things like that that can make myself a little bit more effective in those terms. Like, for instance, Second Wind, which gives me every 100 energy I spend, gets me 15% increased lucky hit chance for 5 seconds. Non-physical damage you deal has a 15% increased lucky hit chance, and so forth and so on. So by the time I'm done, like, I literally have like an amazing lucky hit chance. And this is just a ranged build. Like, this isn't anything special. You know, like there's tons of different ways that you can go with the rogue and have fun messing around with all the different things. You can go into a more stealthy build. You can go into a build that really focuses on crowd control. One thing that this particular character has absolutely no trouble doing is adding vulnerable into her builds. So, like, you can, like, make your enemies vulnerable with blended shadow imbuements. You can make your enemies vulnerable with enhanced cold imbuements. You can make your enemies vulnerable with the exploit glyph, which I believe also gives you the vulnerable for 3 seconds once every 20 seconds. And in general, like, the rogue is one of the easiest characters to get a permanent uptime on vulnerability, which is absolutely great. One of the things that the rogue does have trouble with, and this is something that I've seen, and I haven't really, like, fully explored this, but the rogue does have kind of an issue building fortify. Fortify definitely does make you a lot tankier, and unless I'm missing something, I generally don't see a lot of fortify on her equipment pretty much anywhere, or even on any of her skills and passives. So for the most part, if you want to build fortify on a rogue, I think you're just SOL. There's only really 2 classes in the game that have trouble building fortify, and I'm pretty sure that it is rogue and sorceress. All the other classes have some pretty reliable ways to build fortify, and it's really not a big deal for them. But for some reason or another with the rogue, it's a little bit more difficult to generate fortify. In fact, I just don't see any fortify on the rogue anywhere. And I could be wrong. Feel free to tell me I'm wrong down in the comments. I know you guys love to do that. And I will be like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. I'm glad there's some way that you can generate fortify. But not really seeing a whole lot of it here. Now, the rogue does have some pretty interesting weapon choices, and also you have this interesting thing called weapon mastery, which basically gives you bonuses to the weapons. But if you take a look at the actual weapons, you'll have things like close close damage. You get things like vulnerable damage on the crossbow. Bows have different things. Swords have critical strike damage, and so forth and so on. It definitely makes for some interesting choices. In my opinion, the vulnerable damage, I think, is one of the higher ones. So the crossbows tend to be better in terms of your choice for your bow slot. If you're a melee character, daggers make a lot of sense because that close damage is pretty powerful. But swords crit damage is also extremely powerful too. And if you have the option to choose swords, you probably want to go with swords instead. Although stats on the on your daggers are pretty important. All in all, I really have enjoyed the rogue in the time that I've played her. I do want to make a trapper. That's one of the things that I'm definitely interested in. And eventually I'm going to get to the point where I'm going to try out all the builds on this particular character. But let's talk about endgame builds, shall we? We already talked about her leveling builds. These are leveling builds. Endgame builds are things like Rapid Fire. Rapid Fire is definitely an endgame build that you can go with. Poison Trap build, that is definitely a build that you can build around. And if you're going to go with Poison Traps, you might as well go with Poison Imbuement as well, because you're going to look at those poison passives there at the very least. And there's also things in here that allow you to get additional damage. There's just some ways that you can make it a little bit more effective by combining in the two, because if you're going to have lots of poison effects anyway, you're going to be able to stack the two poison effects on top of each other, so that's not a terrible idea. You can also do things like Flurry. Flurry is also an interesting build. Flurry is the where is that? Yeah, this one right here. Flurry is the kind of like semi-ranged, semi-melee ability. Like, it's kind of hard to explain. Like, these two abilities right here are ranged. These two abilities right here are melee. But this ability right here, Puncture, and this ability right here, Flurry, are kind of like in between melee and ranged. They're not really quite ranged, or they're not really quite melee. They're kind of like a pseudo one. And Flurry, it does have some pretty interesting builds. Twisting Blades is one of the more popular ones. I've seen a lot of people running Twisting Blades on their assassins. And the build that I'm running right now is Penetrating Shot, utilizing the Victimized passive, Shadow Imbuement, and other things like that. This is also a very powerful build as well, although I will say that this build kind of suffers on single target damage. However, I'm still working on that. Like, I've got some time to refine this build and make it more powerful, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to refine it even more. But as of right now, I was doing like a dungeon that was like 25 levels higher than me the other night, and I could literally fire one arrow just about and annihilate an entire pack of monsters, and it was just absolutely glorious. Like, just kind of dumb, stupid, insane. The Rogue does have some pretty cool cosmetics as well. I'm not sure if that really matters for your season pick, but if you're interested in, like having a really cool looking character, I do feel like the Rogue has some pretty cool options, although I'm not entirely sold on the helmet. She does have some pretty sweet equipment. All sorts of various cool pieces of gear. Although nothing like the Sorceress with her boobies hanging out. Really not a whole lot of boobage equipment. So if you want boobage equipment, you're probably going to have to go with the Sorceress. I know, you guys want the boobies. I mean, I think you might be able to get a little bit of leg in there. That's about it. Get a little bit of leg. Want some of that sweet leg. There you go. There's some sweet juicy legs right there. They're kind of muscular. Got little knobby knees. They're a little dirty. She might want to wash them a little bit. But but I'm just messing. The cosmetics are pretty nice on the Rogue. You might have a lot of fun with picking out your cosmetics and making her look really cool. And the male Rogue looks pretty cool too, unlike the male Sorcerer that looks like a character out of Rocky's Horror Picture Show. The male Rogue actually does look he doesn't look half bad either. Trying to think if there's anything else I'm missing here for a season start. When it comes to the Rogue, I think you're going to have a lot of fun no matter which way you go. Whether you go with the ranged side or whether you go with the melee side. I just feel like there's a lot of good options here. I mean, you can choose an imbuement. There's 3 different imbuements. So, like, even if you had 3 people choose Penetrating Shot as their main attack or Twisting Blades as their main attack, you know, maybe one chooses shadow, one chooses poison, and one chooses cold, and you go 3 different routes. Like, there's tons of customizability in this because the shadow imbuements offer multiple ways that you can build your character, even if you choose the same main skill, which is pretty darn cool. And I feel like the imbuements are really one of the more powerful things on the rogue because they offer you a customizability that a lot of the other things don't. Mainly that, and this is just to point it out as simply as possible, is that the shadow imbuement is very good for taking out large groups of monsters. It is a density clear tool. The poison imbuement is extremely good for killing single targets, and the cold imbuement is extremely good for having a large amount of crowd control. So, like, it depending on how you want to go or what you want to add to your character, it's very easy to add that into your character that way. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just yakking about the rogue and why she might be a good pick for your starter character. And if you have any questions, as always, put them down in the comments. And thanks for watching, and keep watching.